Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Fantasy Fullback Dive, brought to you by the good people at the Roto Street Journal. We're paving your way to fantasy excellence, acting as your lead blocker to fantasy glory, making all your football-related fantasies come true. I'm your host, Nat the Truth Jones. With me, as always, the Wolf of Roto Street himself. Wolf, how you doing? We're hitting a free agency pod. We're talking about wide receivers. We're talking about tight ends. I'm interested to see how many of these actually move the needle for you.
Yeah, there's actually a handful of receivers, tight end, big Darren Waller. So there's some definitely big fantasy implications to some of these. Some of them might seem a little bit lackluster, but then you look at who they may have left behind at those fantasy wide receiver cores. So there's more implications than might meet the immediate eye and reaction here. If you're looking for running backs, we did part 2 last week, so definitely check that out. I feel like this is definitely more of a running back heavy free agent class than wide receiver entering free agency. Weren't a ton of huge names. We're still waiting on a couple bombs like DeAndre Hopkins potential trade, Odell Beckham, where's he going to land? So a few more shakeups to the fantasy landscape, but ultimately most of the dust has settled until the NFL draft. So I'm excited to break down these new look pass cores and see if there's any upside. And as you again allude to, it does look pretty lackluster at first glance, but I do think there's a few spots that we can really dive into and mine some fantasy value. So I'm excited to break that down.
All right, this is where you make this is why you're the Wolf, because you're right. I look at the list and it's like not many of these things are doing much for me. So I'm interested. I'm interested if you're going to be able to hustle me on this and like by the end of this podcast, am I going to be like really excited about JuJu Smith-Schuster
foaming at the mouth for Robert Woods and the Texans?
I mean, right. We'll see. We got 11 wide receiver categories to talk about. I would say I'm maybe moderately interested in like a couple of them. So we'll see how many you can sell me on by the end of the hour or whatever that we're recording for.
Awesome. I'm excited to see how many names you're newly interested in after the pod. We'll definitely reevaluate come the end of everything. As you guys are jumping in and joining us too, that thumbs up button is so greatly appreciated, whether you're live with us, catching the replay. Get your questions on in there. Happy to answer anything. I know it's a weird time in the off season, so you might not be here with us right away, but if you catch us on the replay, please do consider that thumbs up button. Help us continue to get out to more people and grow the Roto Street Journal in 2023, baby.
All right, let's get into it right away. Our top story, Brandin Cooks going to the Cowboys, regaining 1,000-yard plus upside. I mean, not going off my notes or anything, Brandin Cooks was, on a horrendously bad Texans team for, I want to say 3 seasons, the last 3. And 2 of those, he put up really good stats. Now, last year, once I decided he was a guy that I should roll the dice on in fantasy, he was absolute horseshit. And so I admit, I got a grudge here. Like, so possibly I'm not seeing this objectively. I'm just kind of like, so what? But I get it. I get the upside. I mean, this is an offense that can move the ball, can pass the ball. What do you think? What are you thinking Brandin Cooks is going to add to this?
It is ironic that like the 1 year you went into Cooks, you missed, because you look at his numbers. He's been top 24.
He was money in the bank every year until I got my hands on him.
Legitimately, 7 out of 9 seasons. He's been a wide receiver 2 or better until last year being one of those only 2 misses in those 9 seasons. He's had 1,000+ yards in 6 of his 9 years, regardless of where he's played, whether it's the Saints, the Pats, the Rams. He's always putting him up. And, of course, the crap Texans. He's been a beastly wide receiver. In fact, just 2 seasons ago, probably part of the reason you were intrigued to draft him, he had more top 24 wide receiver fantasy finishes than Jamar Chase and T. Higgins just 2 seasons ago. So he was just looking like a surefire lock, had a good rapport with Davis Mills. And then there's just the Texans under Lovie Smith. They just crapped the bed. They had no semblance of a functional offense, functional team, really. And that's kind of the ideal here is he's going from this dysfunctional team to ideally a top, past 3 years, top 3 offense. They also did, though, the Cowboys get rid of Kellen Moore, one of my favorite offensive coordinators in the league. Cannot wait to see what he does with the Chargers. Story for another day. And they replaced it with Brian Schottenheimer, one of the worst offensive coordinators, completely and utterly disgustingly run heavy. So that's kind of the risk here. We got that nice track record with Cooks, big, steep quarterback upgrade coming in here with Dak, an offense that has been historically really, really good the past 3 seasons. But is Schottenheimer and McCarthy just going to tank this offense and make him completely run heavy? Now Cooks going from a clear number 1 receiver to a number 2 guy, going to be CeeDee Lamb's caddy, no doubt about that. But maybe that benefits him him at this stage of his career. He is 30. He's you probably his back 9 here. So now drawing secondary coverage. Maybe that's something he can exploit and take advantage of. I definitely like this fit far more than if he was remaining stuck with the Texans. I think Cooks is still pretty damn legit. I don't think he's completely cooked at this stage of his career. So I'm very excited about this move. They get more competition, obviously, with CD, and Gallup is also really legit. But I just think an overall more fruitful offense, assuming, and that's a big assumption to make, that Schottenheimer and McCarthy don't just ruin this team now that Kellen Moore is gone. That very well could happen too. So it's not like a shoo-in slam dunk, but with Cook's track record, with the Cowboys' track record of recent years, I do think he can regain that top 30-ish wide receiver status and that 1,000-yard consistent track record that he's had over his career.
Maybe. We'll see.
Maybe.
Not
sold on number one.
Well, I don't think you're sold on number one.
No,
I
think
we actually feel the same way about it. I think
it really depends where the price ends up.
I see the upside. I could see him returning to being a top 30 wide receiver, and I could also see him being Allen Robinson last year.
He really could. That's absolutely a fair point. At the price right now, late round 9, early round 10, it's not a bad option. It's not somebody I'm avoiding if he falls into my lap in that range, but he's starting to creep up in those underdog drafts. And if you want to play underdog, of course, use code RSJ for a $100 deposit match. We got to do a baked best ball in the near future. We haven't done any yet in 2023, so we are long overdue for getting baked and doing some best ball. But definitely check it out. The link is in the description, Wolfpack, or just use code RSJ. If you haven't played on underdog, truly the most fun place to play. I like Brandin Cooks, but there's some other receivers in that range that we're going to talk about tonight that I typically go to more. So I'm not landing a ton of Cooks at this point.
All right, well, let's move on to the Giants. This is a team I stated at the beginning of last season, I will never believe in the Giants until I see it. And then they kind of ended up, well, they exceeded my expectations. I'll admit it. They did much better. And then they got right up to the point where you almost started convincing yourself, oh, they could beat the Eagles. And then they got beaten like 600-0. And so anyway, they've added a couple new wide receivers. They've added Paris Campbell. Slayton is returning. And, of course, we're going to cheat a little bit on our tight end list because the big pickup, I guess, is Darren Waller, right?
Yeah, that's the big news here is Darren Waller. I do like the other pieces, and we'll talk about why. But as you mentioned, under Brian Daboll, like this weapons cabinet, best toys he's had since getting there, and with just very, very mediocre weapons and a Daniel Jones who was looking like his career was over. Daboll resurrected all of them and had a very solid, top 15 in the league offense, second half of the league, approached top 10 status. And I'm really excited with the continuity of him and Daniel Jones and now some exciting new weapons. I can't wait to see what they do in year 2. Definitely a team I am heavily targeting at their current prices, including Darren Waller, the new arrival. He's going right now in like pick 84 or so. Wouldn't be shocked to see him jump 2 rounds. He's definitely the main course here. I could see him absolutely regaining. Just a couple seasons ago was the number 1 weapon for the Raiders and had monster back-to-back tight end 2 seasons for Darren Waller while he was with the Raiders, going for 223 and then 282 fantasy points. I mean, monster seasons, monster upside. I still think he has it. I know he's been hurt and dinged up, only 11 in 9 games the past couple of years. Obviously, you see Devontae Adams come in and just take the complete monster target load. He faded into the distance there, Darren Waller. But we've seen Brian Daboll use tight ends well. I mean, Dawson Knox had the second most touchdowns under Brian Daboll just 2 seasons ago as a top 8 tight end that season. I really think as the potential main vein of an ascending offense behind an ascending quarterback right now, I really like what Darren Waller's upside could be. I also do like these wide receivers, though, too, and I'm very intrigued to see who takes over that slot role. So let's talk about Darius Slayton, the most consistent guy, the most continuity on this team. He was frequently a top 24 wide receiver, 13, 14, 11, 18.5, 13.6, 15. Then he got hurt, and some other wide receivers stepped up in his absence, and he kind of relegated that role. But we've seen him play under Daboll quite well for long stretches at a time. So I'm very excited. The fact that they toss $6 million a year at him, that's no joke of a contract, especially given the other contracts they handed out this year. That's the most money they gave to wide receivers. Darren Waller will probably be the number 1, but they're paying Darius Slayton as the clear number 2 weapon. He can definitely stretch the field, and I think he'll only get better, more heavily featured in his second year with Brian Daboll. Then you look at who's going to take over this slot. Richie James, This is a shocking stat I was digging into today. One of the craziest ones. He took over as the slot starter in week 11. Guess what he finished as the wide receiver from week 11 to the end of the year? What wide receiver was he in fantasy points?
Well, so in a vacuum, if I had to make my list, I probably would have gotten to about 90 or 100 guys before him. But because you're setting me up like this, I'm going to say like 10.
Yeah, wide receiver 12. The only guys that outscored Richie James from week 11, T. Higgins, Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin, Tyreek Hill, Keenan Allen, CeeDee Lamb, Devonta Smith, Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown, Devontae Adams, and Justin Jefferson. All guys you expect to be on your top 12. Oh, and then Richie James jumps in there with you. He was a top 24 wide receiver for 71% of his last six games when he took over that slot role. Do I think Richie James is special at all? No. I think this role for the slot receiver, whether it was Dale when he was healthy, whether it was Richie James once he took over, whoever was manning the slot for Brian Daboll had a great rapport, great usage. So I'm really intrigued to see who takes that over. First glance, I'm guessing it's Paris Campbell, who had a sneaky, really good year, finally stayed healthy for the Colts. He's got that freakish 4.3 speed. He's a little bigger than you'd expect. He's good with the ball in his hands. I'm really excited to see what he does. He did only get 1 year, $3 million, so it's not like they have this huge financial commitment to him. Maybe Dale gets healthy and just stays healthy all year. I'm a little bit worried about his smaller frame, though, 165-pound type of guy. I love him when he's out there. Very electrifying player. Remember the Giants MVP of training camp. We talked about that one a million times last year. He looked really good when he finally did get out there. But so did Richie James. So to me, it's whoever has this role. Maybe it's Sterling Shepard. He comes back. They signed him to a small deal too. Maybe he's the guy. Maybe it's Jamison Crowder, who they signed to a
You are just listing unsexy guy after unsexy guy.
Unsexy guy. But again, the reason why is Richie James, as unsexy as can be. They could have brought him back too. So clearly they think higher of these other names they're bringing in. It's going to be a mess. It's going to take a little bit of training camp to figure out who that guy is. But once we know who's rolling out as the starting slot wide receiver for this Giants team, there is truly high-end wide receiver 3 upside, given how Daboll uses him. So I'm a big fan of Slayton coming back. Love his price. He's a last-round guy in early best ball. Snagging him. I think I have him in 80% of my early drafts right now. Loving that price. And then I love taking these little pieces. And, of course, I like Darren Waller right now in around 8-9 range as a potential top 5 tight end. I really think this is the offense that can get him back to that range. Just so excited to see how good they were with nothing last year. And now you get some new weapons, some exciting new talent. You get Daniel Jones back. I know we talked about this on our first free agency podcast, but don't forget, Jones was the quarterback 4 from week 11 on. We're talking about when this offense started to click. Richie James came in, Hodgins kind of took over, and they finally seemed comfortable. He was the quarterback 4 in points per game from week 11 on. He was top 12 in all but one of those last 7 games. He had 30-plus fantasy points 3 times. That was the most other than 2 other quarterbacks. I mean, there's a really big ceiling here with better weapons, more continuity, back with Daboll. I'm just really excited for this Giants offense overall, especially at their price tags in early best ball.
How hilarious is it that Daniel Jones just made bank?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not even saying he didn't deserve it. I'm just who would we have ever seen that coming?
No, they didn't even pick up his 5th-year option. Of course, we wouldn't have seen it coming. They didn't even want him. They didn't think.
Crazy.
And then you just balled out with Daboll. You just need it goes to show, anybody that argues coaching doesn't matter, it blows my mind.
Coaching, of course, coaching matters.
I do get some people overrated and automatically pigeonhole this player for this amount of stats, given what they've done in their. You shouldn't do that. But obviously, when a bright offensive mind comes in, a guy that helped make Josh Allen who Josh Allen is, there's a very slim chance maybe he does that with somebody as potentially hopeless as Daniel Jones looked. Look at what he is now, $160 million. One of the top paid players in the league. Coaching obviously matters, and this is one of the clearest signs why.
Hot take: coaching matters.
Yeah, right. Hot take, exactly. Bold.
All right. Eli Moore, he's going to the Browns. I honestly don't know what to think about this. And we've seen Eli Moore produce under non-Zach Wilson related circumstances, right?
Yes.
I don't know if I believe in Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Didn't really put anything on tape last year that would make you want to believe in Deshaun Watson. And he's obviously one of the toughest players to root for in the league. But it's still better than Zach Wilson. I mean, anything is better than Zach Wilson. And Eli Moore, playing with the corpse of Joe Flacco, playing with Mike White, he did average with any other quarterback other than Zach Wilson, nearly 14 fantasy points per game, on pace for 1,030 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 78 receptions across a full season with a quarterback not named Zach Wilson. So we have seen some nice production out of Eli Moore. I loved him as a rookie. I thought we saw some real glimpses of a potential stud in the making. I thought the Jets got a steal on draft day. He was one of my favorite guys coming into the league. So I'm ready to go back in. I do like this potential fit. He's already, Eli Moore, raving about going to Deshaun Watson, how he struggled given that he had, 4 quarterbacks and how that kind of thinks he prepared it to now have according to him, legit quarterback. I've been, trained under all these other guys, and I'm excited. I'm a big believer in Deshaun Watson. It's going to make my life so much easier having a guy like him. So, he's excited about his quarterback. I like the player. I also do want to point out, the Browns remain one of the most run-heavy teams in the league, and that's not going to change. So, yes, Eli Moore has been solid without Zach Wilson, but the Jets also averaged the most pass attempts in the league in games without Zach Wilson, too. So there was a ton of volume going around. I just don't know how big this aerial pie is. I know Amari Cooper had a great season there. I still think he's the number one. Moore definitely can play all over the formation. I mean, last year playing 385 snaps outside, 341 in the slot. I do like that about him. I think he'll definitely be a slot guy. We've seen the Browns design a lot of nice gadget run after the catch opportunities for no names. I think Moore will feast on those. I do love the routes. I love that Stefanski. He's already kind of highlighting. I don't think he's just a slot. I know, he could get pigeonholed there because of his size, but he won plenty on the outside. He's a player you just want to get the ball in his hands. And I think you go back to his college tape and there's tons of downfield throws in his directions as well. So Stefanski's saying the right things. He wants to use them the right way. And they did give up a 2nd-round pick to get him. That's not, nothing. That's not chump change at all. So I think they clearly are envisioning a role. There's tons of, the team was, all his teammates were pissed to see him go. This guy's elite. He just was misused these last 2 years. So there is, I think, a huge ceiling here. I think it is capped because Deshaun Watson, as you alluded to, who knows how good he is. And 2, it's one of the most run-heavy schemes in the league. So I'm not shoving my chips all in, but I am definitely far, far more intrigued right now than I would have been if he was log-jammed in New York Jets again after all their wide receiver additions.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some Jets stuff in a minute also. Actually, after this next one, you got JuJu going to the Patriots, and you referred to him as a great slot weapon. Is another one. It's I don't know. I don't know if I care about this or not. Now, I know that there's been a lot of talk about the Patriots maybe trying to get Lamar. By the way, does that excite you?
I mean, of course it excites me. They came out the other day and said the Patriots are out of the Lamar Jackson sweepstakes, but
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. I could definitely see them being one of those dark horse teams. They love to run. They've got the defense. I would love. Robert Kraft obviously said, he gives Bill the green light here. Come on, Bill, do it.
No, I mean, it's speaking of just unsexy players, Mac Jones is he's about as unsexy as it gets.
Hideous.
And anyway, Lamar's pretty exciting whether you like him much as a quarterback or not.
Yeah.
Anyway, what do you think about JuJu going to the Pats?
I really do think JuJu has humongous upside if this offense can really click with new play caller Bill O'Brien, who has an actually really good track record of coordinating passing games at the NFL level and college level. So I'm very intrigued. Now reunited with Mac Jones, who he coached in college. I'm intrigued to see what this Bill O'Brien scheme is. I'm really intrigued to see if he uses the slot weapon as well as the Pats have historically. Dating back to, before 2020, and yes, Tom Brady, I understand the quarterback. That makes a huge difference. He's not there. I understand it. But still, it's been an invaluable role. And you look before 2020, Patriots slot receivers have been on pace for 140-plus targets, over 24% market share in 12 of 12 seasons, top 12 PPR point per game in 9 of those 12 years, and we're only outside top 20 in points per game just once. It's dipped definitely slightly since then, but when Mac Jones, I'm going to toss out the Cam Newton year because that was just, who knows what that offense was. Not the normal offense by any means. But then Mac Jones comes here and Jacoby Myers, 126 targets, got hurt last year, but was on pace for 115, on pace again for 24% target share, wide receiver 29 and wide receiver 28 across those 2 seasons. Was it top 20 like the Edelman and Welker days? No, but still a nice, stable, consistent, 7 targets or more a game type of situation. So I think JuJu, better after the catch than Myers. Maybe not quite as good at getting open, but I mean, he's pretty nifty. He's pretty crafty at the slot. He definitely doesn't have much long speed. You see him get tackled a lot after he breaks. He breaks a couple tackles and he'll still get caught by the safety. So he's never going to rip those like 80-yard touchdowns or anything of that nature. But he's good in the red zone. He's dangerous after the catch. He's a bulldozer with the ball in his hands. I think he's going to be a Belichick guy. I think he's going to be a really nice fit. And I think he's going to go, again, going around. He goes right around Brandin Cooks' range right here. I would go JuJu Smith-Schuster and hope he becomes that next 130, 140 target slot guy for the Pats. I really think he fits the mold perfectly.
Okay. I mean, maybe. We'll see. It's another guy that it's like, if you told me he was going to be a good slot weapon for him, I wouldn't be shocked. But like, I'm not excited. You know what I mean?
That's fair.
Jets new wide receivers, Alan Lazard to the Jets on big money. Obviously, this puts Moore and Davis both a little bit down. And also now I'm seeing Mecole Hardman also going to the Jets. So we're loading the Jets up with these like quote unquote weapons for Rodgers. And it's like, yeah, Lazard was his kind of main guy, security blanket in Green Bay last year. But like, it's not like they were this lethal combination. I mean, I watched the Packers last year. Like, I don't know. Were you blown away by this? This was not like Devontae Adams 2.0.
Oh, no. God, no. 60 catches, 788 yards. Like, fine, serviceable. Great blocker. Like, I love Lazard. Tough player. But no, fantasy needle, Lazard does nothing for me. Huge contract. I mean, 11 mil a year, 4-year, 44 million. Ridiculous contract. It was clearly just, let's get Rodgers his guys. Like that, let's make Rodgers happy and want to come here because Rodgers is a little fucking diva.
Rodgers isn't going to be happy. He's not going to be happy. He's
going to be lampooned by the media there in New York. He's going to throw a hissy fit and go on some mushroom like darkness retreat week 5. Screw Rodgers. Absolutely.
He's going to be like, he's going to go like, 10 for 45 with 3 picks in his first game. And they're going to like get mad. And Rodgers is going to be like, hey, relax. And they're going to be like, don't tell me to relax, you motherfucker. Yeah, like, this is New York.
He's such a loser. And I also hate the fact that Nathaniel Hackett's the offensive coordinator there. Obviously, I mean, like, why do you hire him after you saw what happened with the Broncos?
Why does he have a job?
Just because he's Rodgers' boy. He's Rodgers' OC from an MVP season ago. So, I mean, it's just all this kind of nepotism.
How many playoff games has Rodgers won in the last, decade?
Why are they so willing to go all in on Rodgers but have no interest in Lamar? Like, I know Lamar's going to come at a greater cost, both financially and draft picks wise, but it's an MVP 2 years ago, and he's still got tons of tread on the tire. You might get 1 year out of Rodgers, and who knows if it's even good. And even if it is good, you know he's going to crap himself in the playoffs. Like, I hate Rodgers. Obviously.
And then you get 1 year out of Rodgers that's like maybe okay, and then you're still on the hook for 3 more years at 11 mil a year with Alan Lazard.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Are you kidding me?
Good for you. Yeah, good. You got Alan Lazard. He's a great blocker. I love to pay my receivers 11 mil a year to go block on the outside. Sure, I mean, sure. It's nuts. It's a terrible contract. Lazard's a fine player. He didn't deserve any. The fact that Mecole Hardman made half of those deals. Mecole Hardman's nothing special either, but at least he's explosive. We've seen some really big field game-changing type of plays where he just goes 90 yards on a catch. Hardman has that upside. Lazard has no upside, in my opinion. So I have no interest in Lazard. I don't know what this means for Corey Davis. My guess is he gets cut because they can save a ton against the cap with him. So I do think Lazard will be a star. I mean, you'll pay somebody this amount of money. He'll be on the field for every snap with a guy he has some decent continuity to. But I have no interest in drafting Lazard.
Are they going to bring in Randall Cobb too?
Yeah, they were originally rumored to be, but who knows at this point if they'll even have mouths to feed.
Maybe Jordy Nelson.
Yeah, right. Get his old guys back to resurrect him from the dead. Greg Jennings, bring him in too. Why not, right? I mean, God. So I don't have a ton of interest in any of these guys other than, to me, this is good news for Garrett Wilson. Like, I've seen a lot of people like, all these weapons are coming. It's got to spell, a little bit of concern for Garrett Wilson. Nah, Garrett Wilson's their Devontae Adams level player. That guy is an absolute stud. Rodgers is going to get there and play with him. If you want a really full length take on him, go back to free agency part 1, where he's still a very much top 5 potential wide receiver. Even with these guys being added, even with these new weapons. And I do think they do give Rodgers a little juice because, even though you'll never be able to trust Hardman on a week-to-week basis, he could just randomly rip off 2 touchdowns and do all the work for Rodgers in certain games. So I do think this isn't the worst offense that Rodgers could have landed in with these weapons, with a solid line, Breece Hall at running back once he gets finally healthy. Like there's some really intriguing, juicy pieces here for the 1 year that Rodgers decides to actually play, if he decides to even freaking play. Who knows? He's still not even there yet. It's just it's considered behind closed doors a done deal at this point. So to me, really the only wide receiver I'm interested in with the Jets is Garrett Wilson, and that interest is still very much so in the second round of fantasy drafts. I still think he's going to be an absolute monster with Rodgers. But the one thing I will say, though, as much as I do love Garrett Wilson, like, would it shock you at all if he like ran one wrong route in week 1 and then Rodgers was like, I don't want that on the field. I want Lazard. Like, that's the fucking type of player Rodgers is. Like, if he could make Garrett Wilson a top 2 wide receiver next year, or he could just be like, I don't like him, so put him to the bench. Yeah. Like, that's the one risk that does come with Garrett Wilson now. I do think we need to acknowledge that, as much as I want to hype him.
Is he your least favorite player in the NFL?
Rodgers? Oh, yeah. He's been – like, I've always hated fucking Rodgers.
Yeah, but I mean – you've always hated him, but there's plenty of people we hate. Like, but is he actually your least favorite player in the NFL?
Top of my head, I can't. There's nobody else that even.
I'm having a hard time coming up with anybody.
Yeah, I can't.
I mean, there's people that have done worse things, like off the field, where I'm just like, that's disgusting, and I kind of put that. I put that in like a separate category.
I agree. Yeah.
But just as far as people that I just get so irritated when I see them on TV now.
You just want to spit on the face. Like,
he's probably.
If I had a list of who I could spit on the face of, Rodgers would be right at the top.
I got to the point where I was like rooting for Tom Brady over him.
Yeah,
which I never thought would happen. I never thought that would happen in a million years. But we went there.
We went.
All right, number 6. This is fun. This is just a one-word thing in the notes. A one name. Odell Beckham. Where will Odell Beckham Jr. land? Talk about ever since this guy got traded to the Rams, like played a little bit.
Played really well. Just didn't play a little bit. Played really, really well. I know it was a short burst, but he was a top 15 receiver. Like he was really
got hurt in the Super Bowl, which I am furious.
After catching a great touchdown.
I had the over on yards for him, which he was definitely going to get. Got hurt in the Super Bowl. Did everything he could in a very short period of time to kind of make his stock explode.
Yeah.
You know? And then we waited all last year. Where's OBJ going to go? Where's he going to go? Where's he going to go? And now the hype's starting to fizzle out again. Where do you think he ends up?
So the reason I had this kind of segue after this is the biggest rumor is the Jets. And everybody thinks that's going to be the most likely landing spot. Even today, Dan Graziano from ESPN saying the most likely landing spot is the Jets. Rodgers is pining for him, saying he really wants him there. Why not just add some other talent to this wide receiver room that if he lands there, that would make me a little bit more nervous for Garrett Wilson. Because if you're really going to keep adding all these mouths, like, I love Garrett Wilson. I still think he would be the clear cut. But would he ever see that like Devontae Adams 200 level target share? I don't think so. So especially if Odell ends up there. As it is right now, yes, I absolutely think he can. Odell would definitely throw a wrench into that. The Jets are apparently the most interested right now and most likely landing spot. But the one team that keeps popping up as well that would just make me go completely hard. I don't even know what word I'm trying to go for. Hard. Well, let's go with that. Hard. Downstairs would be the Chiefs. They are also like pursuing Odell Beckham very, very hard. They've reportedly coveted him for the past 2 years. And now more likely than ever is the fact that Odell Beckham could land there. You look at their wide receiver cast, Odell would immediately, if he's healthy, be the clear-cut, most complete, every level of the field. Give Pat Mahomes, other than Tyreek Hill at wide receiver, the best weapon he's ever had in his young career. Odell Beckham, if he landed the Chiefs and was fully healthy and ready to go, where do you think he'd belong in a fantasy draft? I don't even have an answer yet, but I'm just like, what's your gut reaction to that?
Probably not as high as you think, if I'm being honest. And I get why that would – you're talking about if he went to the Chiefs, right? I mean,
if he went to the Chiefs. Jets would be there, but the Chiefs.
He would be their best – he would be their best all-around receiver. Obviously not – I mean, he'd be behind Kelsey. But I don't know. I mean, one thing that Mahomes proved to us is that he doesn't, need an alpha wide receiver number one. They just won the Super Bowl. Like,
he led the league in passing yards and touchdowns with.
I think he would be a very productive wide receiver. I'm not sure he'd be top 10.
No, I'm not saying that. I don't think he'd be a top 10. Like, I'm not saying he's suddenly a third rounder or anything, but I would consider him anywhere around round like 7, 6, 7.
Oh,
you know,
if he went to the Chiefs, round 7, sure.
That's like where Kadarius Toney's kind of going right now, and we're going to talk about him in a second too. But that's, I'd rather have him than Toney at that point. I like Toney. We're going to talk about Toney. I'm a huge fan of Toney, but I think Odell Beckham, if healthy, is in a completely different stratosphere of anybody, about almost most of the league here. That's why I'm shocked it's taking this long for him to land. Maybe he's just really waiting it out and finding the right spot. We'll see. I really, really hope he does end up with the Chiefs fantasy-wise. That would just be so much sexier than the Jets. There's mumblings he could go to the Giants too, who continue to stockpile we talked about earlier, like random receiver names. That would be intriguing. I'd like to see what Brian Daboll would do with him. The Bills have muted interest as well, which obviously would be potentially insane. But the Chiefs are the one with like the clear-cut, gaping, wide-open hole. Like that's the number one value hole at wide receiver. Odell's clearly the top wide receiver left, and probably was the top wide receiver entering free agency too. So I really hope that's the marriage that ends up happening here. We will find out. I think he definitely would have. You said top 10. I mean, that upside would exist. I don't think that's exactly where he'd land, but round 6, 7 price is probably where. And right now, again, underdog drafts, you can get him at round 12. So I think wherever he lands, you're going to see his price just jump three rounds once we just know he's on a team and in the league. So I have him on. Yeah. So I check it right now. 75% of my teams, I've drafted him. So the Chiefs would be my dream spot. But really, anywhere he goes, the Jets would probably be the ugliest, so it sucks. That's the most likely. But, man, I can't wait to see Odell in a Chiefs uniform. That would be beautiful.
Yeah, actually, after talking it out with you, I don't think we're that far apart on where we think he's going to be. All right, let's stick with the Chiefs, and let's talk about Kadarius Toney. Let's talk about Sky Moore, maybe, and how their path to breaking out is clear now that JuJu, who we already mentioned, is out, and Hardman, who we already mentioned, is out. So what do you think about Toney? I mean, we touched on him a little bit once you finish that thought.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the player. Let's just talk about the potential opportunity first, though. 257 targets vacated. That's the third most in the league. And what particularly intrigues me about those targets is 28 of those came from inside the 10-yard line. That's the most in the league by over 11 targets. The next closest team was 17 vacated targets. So 28, that's a lot up for grabs. And that's also where Toney started to do his damage. He didn't see much volume when he got there, but almost every single play they drew up was somewhere in the red zone, some sort of trick play, or get Kelsey, everybody shifting to him, and you dump it out. You saw in the Super Bowl, he had that touchdown catch where everybody followed Kelsey, and he just walked into the end zone. And 2 touchdowns in the Super Bowl. So this guy is an explosive guy. They got him the ball. He was always making plays. It just wasn't on the field much at all. So that's the big thing here is, can he carve out that role? And all the hype this offseason so far first came from ESPN, James Palmer, saying that the Chiefs really believe that Toney can be their wide receiver 1 in 2023. And then Nate Taylor, friend of the podcast, he's been on before, for The Athletic here, saying that the Chiefs are even more bullish that Toney, the dynamic receiver they acquired mid-year via trade from the Giants, can become one of the league's newest stars. Honestly, it would not shock me at all if he's that like 7th, 8th round receiver, especially if Odell does not end up here, that just goes for like 1,000 yards receiving, 200 rushing, Tyreek Hill type of role. Not a Tyreek Hill player. There's never going to be, everyone wants to find that next Tyreek Hill. Tyreek's in his own class, but Toney does have that similar type of speed, quickness, strong after the catch. Like he's built similarly. The big thing though is also health. Like, can he actually finally stay healthy? He's only played 19 out of 13 possible games, but Andy Reid did cite, this was essentially like his rookie year, coming here, learning one of the most complex playbooks. Like, he missed a few games. I think it will really help him just being familiar with what we're doing. That's going to help. If he just jumps up to a near every down player in this offense, I really think there's no one even close to his ability and versatility. I think, he would be, Kadarius Toney, an absolute monster if they don't go sign Odell or make any big draft day splashes. And he showed he could anchor when he was a rookie. We talked about this on the first free agency podcast that we did, that he commanded when he played a 20.7% target share when he was in there. That's pretty damn solid. He had per routes, per Pro Football Focus, nobody in terms of 50-plus target players who saw more targets per route when he was just a rookie. Antonio Brown, Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, and A.J. Brown. And again, Kadarius Toney is just a rookie, lightly used rookie, didn't stay healthy, but of players that saw 50-plus targets, he showed he could shoulder an offense. So it is within the realm of possibility he takes over. Again, 257 targets, third most in the league, 28 targets inside the 10, certainly where he could get used even better here, and just breaks open the game. 10 touches across his last 3 games, and he had 123 all-purpose yards and 2 scores on those 10 touches. That's just like a little taste of what could come if that role gets elevated. Big fan of Kadarius Toney. Love him at his price. Even if Odell gets added there, I still really like the guy, but especially if he's not ultimately a Chief Odell, love Kadarius Toney. I think he is a great value right now.
All right, let's move on to let's talk about the Panthers. Adam Thielen, DJ Chark, maybe a little Hayden Hurst action. We can dip into that tight end pool again. I got 4 words for Adam Thielen. Your career is over.
You heard it here first, Adam Thielen. You want to come to Buffett? Come on to the podcast. Come talk to the truth over here.
You know where to find me.
Oh, man. It's an interesting situation. So this is kind of a team that went all in to go get their quarterback, probably CJ Stroud of the future. And then they're staring at him. You had to trade DJ Moore to go and get that. So it's a wide open, complete and utter barren wasteland of wide receivers here. But then there's very few people out there that they can sign to go then fill this void. 2 of the bigger names were Thielen and Chark. So let's talk about who has potentially more upside in this offense. I do think there's a little bit of upside to be milked here, just because again, number 1 overall pick, rookie quarterback.
I mean, that's that.
Right? You got to imagine like it's got a talented arm, whether it's Stroud, whether it's Young. I think it's going to be Stroud, and I'm a big fan of him. So you got to like whoever's going to be throwing the rock should be pretty damn solid. I do really like Frank Reich. I think he's one of the best play callers in the league. I know last year was a little ugly, got fired early with the Colts. Matt Ryan just completely fizzled out, just hideous. But overall, throughout his career, Reich's commanded top 10 offenses in like all but last year, pretty much. Even with Jacoby Brissett, they were like a top 15 offense, and that was just a disgusting, gross team, and he just milked the most out of his talent. So I'm a believer in Reich. We saw T.Y. Hilton have some huge years under him, wide receiver 16, wide receiver 14 the next year. And now, to me, DJ Chark's actually the one that intrigues me the most here. I had to pick one of these wide receivers. Sure, Thielen got $14 million guaranteed in 3 years, $25 million, one of the bigger wide receiver contracts of the offseason. DJ Chark only got 1 year, $5 million. So if you're following the money, it's definitely Thielen, and he certainly might command more targets. But I am a big fan of DJ Chark. I always have been, and I know he was dinged up these past couple seasons. But when he played last year, he only played 11 games. 5 of them were in the top 24. He had a couple big, deep speed blowups where he can just rip open the field. I'm a big fan of him. And we mentioned T.Y. Hilton. Chark, to me, offers that same speed. Very similar, even bigger in terms of size, and just a couple of years removed. We're talking about Waller being 2 years removed from huge seasons. Well, Chark just 2 years ago was the wide receiver 16, 73,000 yards, 8 touchdowns on 117 targets in 2019. Chark has shown the ability to be that number 1 anchor. He showed glimpses of it the past couple of years. He just couldn't stay healthy. But I don't see any reason why Chark couldn't mimic T.Y. Hilton, an aging T.Y. Hilton under Frank Reich the past couple of years. So, yeah, I mean, if I'm drafting one of these guys, I'm with you. I think Thielen is absolutely cooked. He showed no juice last year. I was heavily invested in him. So I watched a lot of their games, and he just was not – he's still crafty enough that he could maybe be a security blanket, but, he reminds me of Dalton Schultz. We're going to talk about a tight end, just a kind of meh athlete that is consistent, reliable. He'll move the chains. He'll probably catch 80 balls. So PPR-wise, maybe Thielen ends up being the more intriguing guy just because, again, there's nobody there, and he is reliable. But I definitely think the upside lies here with DJ Chark, who's also going a few rounds after Adam Thielen at this point in early drafts. So give me him. I like that. You mentioned Hayden Hurst as well. The only reason to bring up his name is, one, he's actually a pretty good athlete. Hasn't really put much on tape, though. Never really turns into any much production. But Frank Reich does love his tight ends. Dating back to the Eagles, then his whole time with the Colts, consistently top 5 tight end target share across his years. Only 1 year did he not have a top 5 year where tight ends were targeted in terms of percentage-wise. So I don't love Hurst, but the volume will probably be there. There is some athleticism. He had a few decent days with the Bengals. But to me, that's kind of if you can't do it with Joe Burrow and the Bengals, you're really going to do it with some rookie quarterback in the Panthers offense. Probably not, but there's worse last round tight end bets as a best ball, at least, because he'll probably have a couple big games just given how Frank Reich likes to use his tight ends, and especially in the red zone.
All right, that's fair. Let's talk about the Vikings, where Adam Thielen, once was an extremely dangerous weapon. KJ Osborne breakout is impending. You heard it here first, folks. We got a rookie value hole that needs to be filled. What's going to happen?
Yeah, so there's a lot of intrigue here. Obviously, Justin Jefferson, the best receiver in the league, going to still anchor this. Maybe sees 200-plus targets now with no Adam Thielen.
Do you think he's the best receiver in the league?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, at this point, like if I'm building a team, I mean, maybe Devontae Adams at this stages of their career. Like,
I'm not saying if you're building a team. He's clearly the guy if you're building a team. I might still lean Adams.
You could say Tyreek can wreck a game a little bit more than anybody else. There's certainly names.
Tyreek's most likely to have 3 touchdowns randomly.
Yeah. I still think Jefferson's just by far the most complete in terms of size, speed, all the route tree. Like, yeah. And obviously the youth on his side too, if you're building a team. But even like just stepping on the field tomorrow, I think Jefferson's the best. Like, I really do. And so he's the first overall pick in fantasy drafts right now for a reason. And now he's probably going to even see more volume. You didn't need me to sing Justin Jefferson's praises anybody out there, though. You already know he's a monster. It's just crazy that his ceiling could somehow even be higher. But KJ Osborne definitely has big breakout potential if he can exit this offseason as the number 2 wide receiver here. So we cited this on the original podcast, the first free agency podcast. But to go back to why KJ Osborne has so much upside, he's only seen 6+ targets in 10 games across his career. He's had 14 or more fantasy points in 9 of those 10 games. 90% of the time when he sees 6 or more targets, he's going for 14 or more fantasy points. Unsurprisingly, he's been top 24 wide receiver in 8 of those 10 games. A high-end quality wide receiver too, averaging 18 fantasy points per game when he's done that. I mean, it is just insane how good Osborne's been when he gets used. Last year, he only had 2 games with 6 or more targets in this new overall offense. 18.3 fantasy points and 31.7 fantasy points in those 2 games. And now he could be stepping into that clear-cut number 2 role. Now, I do think a rookie will be added here. He'll probably end up being my favorite rookie wide receiver of this class because there's not a clear standout talent. It's really going to be about who lands in the best situation. This is obviously going to be a good one. One of the pass-happiest teams, an established quarterback, whether you like Cousins or not. We know he can sustain fantasy goodness. But I wonder if that rookie talent will be good enough to leap KJ Osborne. My guess is at least as a rookie, no. And Osborne's going to have a really, really nice – he's only been in the league 2 years now. 3rd season, I think it's going to be a big, big breakout for KJ Osborne, targeting him everywhere. I'd rather have him than Brandin Cooks as a number 2 wide.
I would too. Yeah. Agree. All right. Let's talk about the Texans wide receiver core. Let's talk about Robert Woods, and we're dipping even deeper into our tight end list, so that's going to be even shorter now because Dalton Schultz, poor bastard, is now in Houston. Man, I don't want any piece of either of these guys.
Yeah, it's an ugly, ugly landing spot. It's an ugly, ugly pass core. But let's talk about why there could at least be some sneaky value here.
Okay.
One, there is no team that's departed more targets, 357 targets. That's crazy amount right there. No team that's departed more air yards, 2,860 yards. That's nearly 70% of their air yards last year. They're the next closest on inside the 10 targets to the Chiefs with 16 there. That's 64% of their inside the 10 targets. That's most in the league. So most target share, air yards inside the 10, like everything's vacated. It's a complete fire sale. So wide open slate here. Is it going to be Robert Woods? Is it going to be Dalton Schultz? Does John Mechie get healthy? Does Nico Collins step up and prove to be a true number 1? All great questions. I don't know. It's a gross overall offense, but they will be drafting a rookie at number 2. Whether that ends up being Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, I'm not sure, but it's certainly going to be an upgrade over Davis Mills. So that's one reason to be a little more excited in addition to the vacated volume. Now it's just a matter of who ends up stepping up and being the number 1. I think Robert Woods truly, it's so gross. It just doesn't sound good. He didn't look that great with the Titans last year, but he was coming off a torn ACL. And by the second half of the year, he did have a couple sneaky top 24 wide receiver games. Out of his last 5 games, 2 of them, it looked like he was finally getting his legs under him. Why would I still be interested in him, though? Well, coming over from the 49ers is their new offensive coordinator. He was the passing game coordinator for the 49ers. Very similar scheme to what the Rams run, and that's where Robert Woods had the best years of his career. A lot of after-the-catch stuff, a lot of movier guy around the formation. If Woods has any juice in his legs, there's clearly going to be target upside here. There's going to be a coordinator who knows how to use him that went out and gave him $15 million over 2 years, one of the highest receiver contracts for a player that's not that great, but the money suggests a really solid role. We now know Cooks is gone to open up some of those targets. So I think Woods could be that guy. I think Dalton Schultz has the upside to be that top target guy here. And he's not a great athlete, but he caught 70% of his catches the past 2 seasons, 103 first down receptions across his last 3 years. Really reliable, solid chain mover. He's got 17 touchdowns also across those 2 years, 5th most since 2020. He's not overly exciting, but will move the chains. Again, the 49ers passing game coordinator, like George Kittle, obviously a plus player compared to Dalton Schultz, but we know this guy can use his tight ends as the main vein of passing attacks. We've seen it happen before. So whether it's Dalton Schultz, Robert Woods, maybe Mechie does get healthy. The reports have been, thankfully, and very encouragingly promising on John Mechie recovering from cancer last year. So it's great to hear. Prayers up. Everything's working out for him. And maybe it's the big-bodied Nico Collins. You saw a 25% target rate, targeted 1 every time 4 routes he ran. That's the same rate as Devonta Smith last year, and there's no other competition here. Nico Collins had a few big games last year, so maybe it's him. I don't know who it's going to be, but I do know they're all dirt cheap right now in underdog drafts. Right. And for a reason, it's an ugly situation, but I think it's a little bit more sex appeal to the situation. Again, given the vacated volume, by far the most in the league, given that an exciting rookie will be coming there, I think it's Texans. Hideous. There's a little bit more sex appeal here that meets the eyes, and somebody's going to emerge here with some legitimate value, especially at their price tags right now.
Okay. Yeah, that didn't sound crazy. I admit it. I'm a little more convinced.
Maybe he's not on the roster right now, right? Maybe they trade for a rookie or trade up in round.
Obviously, we really like their running back, of course. And so, anytime you have one strong piece on a team, that does open things up for someone else to do something,
Yeah.
So,
and they've put a ton of money. No other team has put more money into their offensive line other than the Lions. So they put a lot of money into it. They've got a lot of solid players, some early round draft capital last year. I do think they're building the foundation here. If the rookie quarterback ends up being good, there's going to be a really good fantasy receiver to come out of here. Who knows who it is, but throw some cheap darts at it because maybe it is nobody consistent, but there'll be guys that have these boom spots week in and week out. Like, we'll see what happens. It's a more intriguing offense than the Titans ever would look like on paper. That's all I'll say.
That's fair. All right, let's wrap up wide receivers. Then we only have to hit like 3 tight ends, maybe.
Yeah, we've already covered most of the tight ends, and those are pretty quick.
Just real quick, rapid fire. Deontay Hardy to the Bills. Nelson Aguilar, the Ravens. Marvin Jones. Back to the Lions. Homecoming.
Love it. He's such a Dan Campbell type of guy, I bet, too. So I'm sneaky intrigued by – actually, the reason I lump these guys all together, for best ball purposes, all 3 of these guys are going to have a couple 20-point days in 2023. Yeah, they all have that speed. Maybe Marvin Jones at this stage of his career doesn't have the deep speed, but still a good wide receiver, red zone weapon, still a guy that can get down the field. I am most intrigued by far, though, by Deontay Hardy, and it's pretty obvious why. It's the Bills' offense. The top 3 in points for 3 straight years. Deontay Hardy – had apparently had a ton of suitors. I was reading an article about him, and he decided that the role that the Bills were promising him was the most intriguing of them. Right after signing him, they cut Isaiah McKenzie. So Deontay Hardy, very good quickness, could be that slot guy, but also great burning speed down the field. So I definitely think he's going to have a few bombs, the cannon of Josh Allen unleashed to him down the field, a few big blow-up days. I don't know that in regular fantasy you'll ever be able to just put in Deontay Hardy and trust it, but in best ball, I think you're getting at least 3 to 4 really big spikes out of this guy. So of this list, again, Aguilar, the Ravens, again, wide open receiver core, something could happen there. And Marvin Jones returning home, DJ Chark now gone, maybe he plays that role, but I really, really, really like Hardy, especially if you can carve out that number 3 role. Of course, if they trade for Hopkins or, some of these rumblings that are out there, my God, Diggs at Hopkins and Josh Allen, that would be terrifying. Hardy would be riding the pine the rest of the season. I understand that this is just as things stand at the moment, but if he enters the year as the wide receiver 3 here, they gave him a solid contract at 13.5 mil, 5 mil guaranteed, great special teams player, but I really think there's some untapped upside on offense as well. Big fan of Hardy, and I'm excited to see what he does.
All right, let's move on to tight ends. We don't have to talk about Waller or Schultz, who we've talked about at length, but let's talk real quickly about Mike Gesicki going to the Patriots.
The best gritty there is.
Yeah, this is where we are. I don't care. Do you care?
I do care in the sense that a couple reasons.
Right.
One, I already cited, I like Bill O'Brien. I'm intrigued to see what type of offense he brings here. And he reunites with Gesicki, who he recruited over there at Penn State and used to great avail. I was very intrigued by Hunter Henry in this like lone tight end role. There was no John O. Smith. So I had Hunter Henry already bumped up to like my top 14, 15 tight ends. This obviously crushes that. I do think it's going to be a situation where they're both pretty good on certain weeks, but you just never know. They're constantly nibbling each other's cheese because they're both solid players. They're both going to be used pretty well under Bill O'Brien, in my estimation. I just think it's going to be a constant 1 week it's Henry, 1 week it's Gesicki, and you're going to have a headache trying to figure out who it is. If I had to pick one of the two, it would be Gesicki. I think he's a phenomenal athlete. You look at his speed score, 4.54 40, 95th percentile, 118.7 speed score, 96th percentile, 99th percentile in burst score, 98th percentile in agility score, 100th percentile in catch radius. Like, as an athlete, the guy's a freak. And I just don't think he's really been used properly yet by Miami. Certainly not last year when you have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. I don't even blame you for not using this guy. But I think there's a ton of untapped potential with Mike Gesicki. We've seen him shoulder. Just a couple years ago, he was the main vein of the passing attack for Tua when he was a rookie. So I think there's some sneaky upside to Gesicki. I was really hoping he ended up with like the Chargers or one of these teams with like a wide open situation. Unfortunately, he didn't. He goes to the path where it's going to be a nibbling cheese situation. But I think he's a good enough athlete, and we've seen Henry deal with injury concerns across his career. So if Henry got hurt, I could see Gesicki sneaking into the top 8 tight ends. So yeah, I think it matters just because of how much of a freak this guy is and how we've seen him produce as a main vein before in the past. Maybe he could be for the Pats this year. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I like him as a player. I really do. I didn't like the landing spot either. Nah. Let's talk about Austin Hooper and O.J. Howard going to the Raiders. Wow.
Yay. Yeah, to me, this doesn't matter at all. Devontae Adams is still the main vein there. And then main vein, the term of the day, I guess. We're talking about passing attacks. But even with Darren Waller and vacating quality target share there, I don't think either Hooper or Howard are going to move the needle at all. If anything, it just means more targets for Adams. Obviously, the new weapon there, Jacoby Myers, this secures the fact that he'll be heavily, heavily involved. Maybe you could get Renfro and Myers somehow on the field together when you have such a weak tight end core. I think the big reason this matters is it completely opens up Chigoziem Okonkwo, one of my favorite tight ends over there with the Titans. No Hooper there. Once Hooper went down last year, it happened, I believe, in week 12. We saw Chig go for 10.8, 18.5, 10, couple duds, and then a 13.2 game. So, 4 of his last 6 games were tight end 1 numbers for a rookie that was on the field for only about 50% of the snaps. I think this secures him as an every down threat. We've already had their offensive coordinator single out Chig as a guy that just was underutilized as a freak athlete that can get deep down the field, that can run after the catch. Talk about how excited he is to drop Tim Kelly, plays for Chigoziem Okonkwo. And I really like Tim Kelly. I think the Texans let a good one get away there. So I'm very intrigued, not by Hooper, O.J. Howard at all, but nothing to do with them. Won't draft either of them, but it does open up the Okonkwo breakout doors, which I think were already going to be kicked open anyways, whether Hooper left or not. It's just nice to see him fully opened at this point. Big fan of Okonkwo and excited to see what he does with this wide open situation.
All right, last but not least, Irv Smith to the Bengals. This is honestly, when I saw this whole list, and you have intriguing written by it. And that was one, I have to admit, when I saw that, I was kind of like, okay. Like I was more interested in that than almost any of the other ones, which might be stupid, but it's more I look at the team and I look at the guy throwing the ball and it's like, of course I'm going to be a little interested. I think Burrow's just awesome.
Of course. Why wouldn't you think he's awesome? Burrow's the fucking man. If there's anybody you could build your franchise around right now, I'd say Joe Burrow's my number one. There's nobody else. Maybe Mahomes.
I mean, Mahomes. Listen. I like Burrow. I pull for Burrow more than Mahomes. But like, if you didn't say Mahomes to that question, you're crazy.
Yeah, it's Mahomes. But Burrow's the number 2 for me, and it's pretty clear number 2 for me too. But yeah, Irv Smith, catching passes from Joe Burrow could definitely vault him up. To me, it's a little bit like the Hayden Hurst argument. It's like, good athlete playing with Joe Burrow, he's probably going to do great. And Hurst was okay last year. 4+ receptions in 11 of 16 games, not bad. But it was like an 8.0 yards per route run. Yeah, just not great. The deep speed was never really utilized. The red zone potential wasn't ever utilized. And Irv Smith, always. This is the guy, and I put it on here. I can't quit him. Like I was never ready to write him off. He's always going to get hurt. I never want to touch him. But you come to an offense like this. The Bengals tight ends did combine for a 17% target share the past 2 seasons. And Smith entered the league as we talked about Gesicki being a plus athlete. Smith's not quite on that level, but 4.63, 85th percentile, 70th percentile speed score. He's got some solid juice to him if he could finally just stay healthy. We've seen those glimpses where he has 2 touchdown days and is running wide open and destroying safeties and his routes. Like, we've seen glimpses of Smith potentially being a really dangerous weapon. He just 9 touchdowns, 91 receptions. Like, he's had some good spurts in his career. He's just never been able to stay healthy. But if he could stay healthy with this offense, there really is some actual upside there to Irv Smith. Like you said, it's this environment more than anything, but there's athleticism to him too. And it just will require health, which he hasn't had any single year in his career. But what if this is the 1 year he stays healthy? It's a last round stab, and there's worse ones you can make at the tight end position.
Agree. All right, let's hit the mailbag. We got just a couple things, couple comments.
Hell yeah.
Henry saying, I don't believe in Bill Cosby either. That's when I was talking about Deshaun Watson.
I was like, how the hell did Bill Cosby go? Henry, that's a great comment.
It is, yeah. but he gets mad at us in a minute. He says he's a ball hog. He won't want to dole it out to many guys. And then he says Deshaun will give it to Chubb, run it himself, or throw to Cooper.
Yeah.
And then he said, I'm leaving a thumbs down since y'all are ignoring the chat.
I guess it must have been Henry's first time here. I hope you're still with us here, Henry. We typically do it so we get through all the content. It just helps us out in terms of clipping the social medias and clipping the YouTube stuff. We always address the chat. I appreciate you coming in, interacting with us in the off season like this. I hope you're still there and you come back. Because I could be annoyed. I can see if it's your first time and like nobody's even looking at you, like that'd be annoying. So apologies, Henry. I hope you're still around and catch this, because we do always, that's one of the things we pride ourselves in, is we answer every single question every single time. Usually we get mailbags of like 100, 200 in the season, crazy ones. Hopefully you caught this and you come back, but you probably missed it and he's probably on the way out. So,
and if not, thanks for the Bill Cosby comment anyways.
Yeah, he gave us a chuckle either way, Henry. So thanks for tuning in and interacting with us for a little bit, but yeah.
So Dave said, did Truth get more gray since the season ended? So there's a 2-part answer to that, Dave. So the first part is definitely, because I get more gray every day. I mean, once you start getting gray, it doesn't slow down at any point. So yes, but also I was at soccer practice. I came back. I need a haircut. The more hair that I have, like my hair is gray, like here. And so like when I don't get a haircut, I look like, the more hair I have, like the grayer I look. And also I haven't shaved and my beard does come in like kind of white. So I do look pretty grizzled and old right now. I admit it. Next time I record, I will have shaved and I'll have less hair and I'll actually look like I've de-aged like 5 or 6 years. You'll be impressed.
It's been a tough off season for the Truth.
Yeah. I mean, I did look when I got on, I was like, dude, I look old. But I'm able to, with a couple tricks, dial it back just a little bit. So next time you'll be impressed by how young and spry I look.
Yeah, you gonna go to any of the Just for Men? A little coloring in there.
I never have. It's not like I don't consider options at times, but as long as I keep it pretty short for now, like I actually still look pretty young.
Yeah, my dad, when he was about your age, started to go gray. He did the Just for Men for a few years. And then he was just like, fuck it. Like, what am I doing here? And he embraced the gray, and now he just loves it. He calls it the gray poof on his head. And, it's great. It's beautiful.
I don't know what I'll do. I'm still not gray at all on top, but I mean, I know it's coming.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens, Dave.
Oh, better. Embrace it.
But thank you for blowing me up on national.
Yeah, of course, David. I wasn't going to say it. I thought you looked a little weathered when you came in today. But
no, I noticed it. I absolutely noticed it. Absolutely. But watch, next time we record, I'll look younger without any dyeing or magic tricks other than just like shaving and having a haircut.
Nice.
You'll watch. And yeah, I thought the same thing. It's crazy. I was like, wow, this is the oldest I've ever looked on the air.
Before we go on the comments, one thumbs up button would be so appreciated. If you're still here with us, awesome. We just didn't call for thumbs up at all throughout this one. So it would be amazing if you could help us out and give us a few of those. But truth is, we did say at the beginning, at the top, you were going to decide, is there any of the 10 to 11 people we talked about tonight, did anybody move the needle? Did anybody excite you? What's your recap of like, were any?
I don't want to sound just overly negative on principle, but no, not really. Like,
yeah,
I could see not really. Like if you told me someone on this list was going to have a kind of big year, I guess I would maybe lean towards, one of those teams that's going to get one of the top two quarterbacks. Sometimes rookies start out, it usually takes a while, but I don't know, maybe one of those guys. But no, I'm not moved by any of these. I could see, I'm a little bit intrigued by Waller to the Giants, but not like super excited. And that's not your fault, by the way. This is the material that you have to work with. It's just, I don't know, man. I'm not too excited about any of them.
I think you're undervaluing just the Giants offense as a whole. I think there's going to be some value to come out of that. It's trickier to know who it's going to be. I think Waller is going to be a beast there. And one of those receivers, whoever takes over that slot, is going to be a beast.
So, all right. That I thought that was the most intriguing point that you made was the Giants slot role, which I had not really considered, but we don't have an exact name attached to that yet. So I guess I'm going to withhold judgment on that for now. I thought that was a good point.
I am intrigued too by more so the two names that are still in their same homes and people left around him. Kadarius Toney, very, very intrigued by him, and very intrigued by KJ Osborne. The rest is the Jet situation is hideous to me. Brandin Cooks would be sexy if Kellen Moore was still there, 2-run heavy. JuJu is a slot weapon. I think there's a little more juice than you're giving that credit to. I think DJ Chark, if he stays healthy, I think has some sneaky juice to him too. And Eli Moore, a twin collaborator saying here, he's had those glimpses of being a potential great receiver. I don't know if the Browns is the home to squeeze that out. I don't know if Deshaun Watson's the quarterback to squeeze that out. If Watson ends up being the quarterback that was top 5 every single year of his career until last year, of course, then him and Cooper could be monsters. They certainly gave him the contract that says they believe that. But, it's just an underwhelming class. I think until Hopkins gets moved, that's going to be the big domino of the wide receivers this year.
Dave says don't talk about the Jets until the trade is done. Okay.
It's fair. Happening.
And also rapid fire after asking me if I'm getting grayer, which we already discussed at length. Then he comes back with don't talk about the Jets till the trade's done. Hackett sucks. Sure.
Yeah. That's
FYI, I'm watching while I put my 8-month-old to sleep. That's dedication
from Campanelli. That's why we love you, brother.
Good for you. Thank you so much for tuning in as usual. And I honestly don't care if you give me a little bit of hell. I saw the same thing you saw when I looked in the camera. And last but not least, Bulldog 0921.
Legend.
Thumbs up. Thanks for checking in.
Always good to see a familiar face pop into the show.
And that's it.
Hey, well, Wolfpack, thank you again so much. This was, again, part 3 of the series. Part 1, we broke down a lot of the quarterbacks, some of the first day one news, Jacoby Myers, a couple running backs, things of that nature. Part 2 was all the running back news. So if you missed that one, I do think there's a lot more fantasy swinging news in that. It is just a lackluster receiver core. That being said, all that lacklusterness is built into a lot of these prices. And I do think a couple of them and their new homes. Even if it's the Texans, who knows if someone from the Texans with a new exciting rookie and 380 vacated targets, something could emerge there. Who knows? There's going to be more value than what this class appears to be on the first eye. So thank you. If you sat through this and you're listening to this, it's not the most exciting names. It means you're a diehard like us. So cheers. And that means that, especially if you haven't already subbed to the channel, would love to have you be a regular here with us at the Wolfpack on YouTube. RotoStreetJournal.com is where all our other content is located and based. Roto Street Journal on Instagram, Facebook, wherever you're at. Fantasy Fullback Dive as well, if you prefer a podcast, is where you can find the audio of all of our shows. Thank you so much. I know it's the off season. We'll probably start doing some rookie stuff these next few weeks leading into the draft. Of course we will.
Big best ball too.
Big best ball. No doubt about that. Next week we'll hit one for sure. 100%. Well, Wolfpack, thanks again so much on the way out. The thumbs up would mean the world. And a world full of fancy sheep. Be that wolf, guys. Later.